one of the most frustrating things as a team manager or a business lead is when you or somebody in your team or company comes up with an amazing process, and lo and behold, a month or two later, you see that nobody has implemented it. All of your ideas, your efforts have gone to waste, and nothing comes out of it. One famous quote, or at least good for me, was from Monish Pabrai. He said this on My First Million, which is a podcast show. And he said, an idea is like an asshole. Everybody has one. And I think that's very true, because ideas don't really matter. A lot of people have ideas. The important thing is how they get executed. And so I wanted to talk about how we have struggled with this. I've personally struggled with this in every company that I've worked with, because this is not a universal, like a unique thing. It is universal across companies. You'll see that people often struggle with the idea of implementing something that can help improve the overall process. So the way I think about this is that it's essentially a 4-step process. So the first thing is, anytime you have a problem, you should think about, first of all, doing that thing manually. So first you got to identify what the problem is, right? Anything that reduces the efficiency of your team or tends to diminish your overall output is a problem. So the very first thing you should do is document it. Do it manually. Don't worry about automating it. Don't worry about improving it. Just document everything word to word as it is manually. And I think this is a huge problem, especially with engineers, because I don't know if it's specific to engineers. I think this is true for everybody, but like engineers in particular would like to solve difficult problems, but they don't actually want to go ahead and do the process of documentation because it's sort of boring. They're not really solving a difficult problem there. So this is in itself a difficult start. But I think that documentation is very useful, because not only are you able to list all the steps, but you're also able to think about, I think that when I think about solving this problem, I directly go from step 1 to 4. But when I write it down, I can think that there might be other steps involved. Like, as an example, if you're going from place A to place B and you have a bike, your natural reaction is, I'm just going to pull out my bike and it's going to take 30 minutes to get here. But if you write it down, you're like, okay, well, let's investigate I have to go from place A to place B. I have to think about all the media of transport through which I can go. And once you start writing down the steps, it makes sense to you, and you can think about, the path which I think is the default is not necessarily the only path that I can take. So I think that documentation helps in that sense. So that's definitely step 1 of the process. And then step 2 is you should think about, let's now figure out where the inefficiencies in this process are. So I think, like, my personal favorite is, if there's anything that anybody in the team has to do multiple times in a week, in a sprint, in a month, whatever your time frame is, then that is definitely something that needs to be improved. Even if that person is doing an amazing job, if, for example, a very simple thing, if I have to go and turn off all the lights at the end of the day I don't do it is the day when my bills are going to be higher. So that process can definitely be automated. I can have smart lights or any sort of automation. And this is valid for literally everything. If you think that one person is supposed to review everybody else's tasks, the day that person goes on vacation, you would no longer be able to do that, right? So things like those are definitely areas that you should highlight when you think about what can be improved. And this is where I'd like to talk more about process, because it's easy for people to stitch together individual tasks, but it's not the same as building a process. So if you think about, just in general, across the world, across different companies, you'll find people who were not a good fit in one company, but were a great fit in other companies. And I don't think this is just about their skill. I think a lot of it has to do with process, because if I enter a company and I'm subjected to training, I am given a due process that I have to follow from day one, then my output is naturally going to be better. So, and this is one of the reasons why I feel like you could give a person who, any person that you deem inefficient, take that person, put them to Toyota, have them go through the Toyota process. I'm sure that person would be very efficient, right? Because their whole process is designed such that you can't help but be efficient. Because if your output dictates the next person's output, and there's excellent tracking about where you're stuck, you get immediate help, then, there's not much reason for you to not perform well. So I think that the second step in the process would be, in this entire process, is to build the process. So you find the inefficiencies, and then you talk to your team and you talk about what are the things where we can improve the overall picture. So this is something that would be like a cross-team exercise. You all sit together and you think about what are the areas of improving the system. And then the third thing is, you've decided what the things can be, and now you think about how can we implement this process. So you could come up with a variety of methods to do that. There are a lot of softwares in the market, depending on the field you're talking about. If you're talking about sales and marketing, there are a lot of CRM software. If you're talking about HR systems, there are a lot of HR management systems. In engineering, you have a lot of project management systems. So there are a variety of tools available, although I personally prefer to have minimal multiple tools. If I can do some development on a base tool, then it will at least not be an uphill battle for my team to learn another set of tools. But we'll talk more about that. So I think that's the third process. And the fourth process, which is very important, where I think up to process step number 3, a lot of people get there, but it's really the fourth step, which is implementing this and what strategies you need to take to be able to make sure that this is successful, which makes or breaks this entire idea. So as an example, when I think about, I'm going to take a very simple example. At StatCon Electronics and StatCon Powtech, a couple of companies that I'm associated with, we have this process where, because we have 3 units, they're located in Noida, people have to go back and forth between them. And they're not exactly within the same campus, so they're going to cross the road. So we want to make sure that people from other companies or other places who are not allowed to come in don't enter the companies, right? So we have this gate pass sort of a system. Similarly, if there are some contractors or some guest workers who are coming in on specific days, we have to have a way of tracking that system as well. And this system was done in a highly manual fashion. The HR team had to take care of this data, so they would look at the register with the security guard maintained, and then they would try to put that in Excel and look at the data. Sometimes the slips would get lost, and we would have missing data. We would try to make things up, and so on and so forth. So that was it's something that sort of shouted for help. And so we use Microsoft Teams within the company. So the Microsoft ecosystem allows you to do automations using processes, using tools like Power Automate, Power BI, and so on. So we basically we built something on SharePoint List, and that allows us to do all sorts of automation. So the guard. First of all, the guard became more tech savvy. So instead of using a pen and paper, he was using an iPad now. But then the more important thing is that we had a lot of data. So we could analyze and understand what was going wrong. And it also helped eliminate a lot of the time that the HR team was spending trying to take that data and manually put that in. So I think now, if I walk through the whole set of processes that I talked about, the number one thing was, you look at the process, right? So we try to document the whole process, first of all, because there was no documentation around this. It's a very simple thing. People know that, there's a piece of paper, you got to go fill it out, and this is how it works. So first, we documented every stage of that process. Second, we then discussed with the team and we talked about, okay, what are the problems you face? How can we make sure that there's minimal effort from your part and there's a lot of automation that can happen in the system, which will take care of this? And then the third process was to identify the tool, which, like I said, I prefer to have tools that are not external. I don't want to take an HR management system or a new tool to do this same thing. Everybody in my company is using Microsoft Teams, so I'd rather have people use that. So we did that. And in the fourth stage, this is where I really think you have to kind of force your hand. So what I did was we came up with a strategy that we're just going to get away with the paper. We will try both for some time, the paper and the iPad version, and then we'll just get rid of the paper version. And sure, there were bugs later on, and people struggled when the bugs came in. Both all in our favor because now the whole system is automated. Now, this is a very, very simple example, but the same thing has been applied in other places. So StatCon Electronics, for example, is one of the leading providers for integrated power supply solutions to the industry. And we wanted to make sure that our product delivery is faster, it's better. Customers often end up making a lot of last minute changes. They have new specifications. They for example, we got a purchase order for something and then they're like, no, well, actually, we were not clear on what we wanted. And so now we want to make some changes. So we don't want to make our customers unhappy. So we have to come up with a way to make sure that we're still able to deliver those things on time. And so what we did was there was usually a mismatch between the marketing team, which was directly dealing with the customers, the production team, which was well, you tell us one thing one day and then you change the order eventually. Then there was the after sales service support, the accounts team. So what we did was we did the same thing. We got the process down. We had everybody sit together. Everybody had their own sets of Excel sheet because they were trying to track their data in their own way. And one data did not speak to the other. So we put it all together. And then eventually we said, okay, let's just build this system. Again, we built it on the Microsoft Teams system because everybody was using that. We used Microsoft Lists, Microsoft Power Automate. We built some dashboard in Power BI, in Excel. And now, eventually, to build it, we basically said all the previous Excel sheets are now are moot. We're not going to look at them. We are only going to track this particular data set. And on top of that, the other thing that I've observed is sometimes what happens is, like I was saying, if the person responsible is on vacation, you can no longer do that thing. So instead of doing that, we said, let's just make sure that we have a project lead for every project, and we're going to switch people so that everybody gets a chance. And this is something that I've seen implemented really well across another company, where what we did was I might be the project lead for one project, and there would be 3 engineers who I need for this project to be successful who are going to work with me. Maybe one is mechanical, one is electrical, one is software. Maybe I could be one of the people on the project as an engineer as well. But then in the other project, I would not be the project lead. I would be reporting to this other person who happened to be reporting to me for one project. So what this did was it basically enabled us all to build our leadership skills. But at the same time, it ensured that we were tracking the project while not being dependent on one person, because there are multiple projects, sub-projects that are required for the whole project to be successful. And by dividing it and letting everybody take accountability, this overall system becomes successful. And this is the same approach that we're using at StatCon Electronics for the example that I was talking about, to do cross-team collaboration. So I think that once we build this model, we can definitely help scale these things. Both of the examples that I gave in these situations are purely software, but the process is scalable. So in other cases, for example, there were instances where somebody was analyzing the data, and they were for the integrated power supply system for StatCon Electronics, as well as for solar inverters in StatCon PowTech, we were basically manually testing a lot of the data. And we obviously want to make sure that no product is sent to site without significant testing, but it took a lot of effort. And yeah, if a tester was absent or the one who had the most experience was absent, then the project got delayed. So again, we discussed the process, we documented it, and then we thought about tools. So we built some hardware jigs, we built some embedded systems, and then we built some robotic process automation tools, which helped us remove this impediment in a fast delivery of our system. But I think the most important thing is to understand that it's easy for people to come up to step 3, right? Like I said, processes, tools can be built, but the difficult part is to getting people to adopt that. So as an example, if you see, Microsoft is a very successful company, but they have had multiple cases where, a big company, maybe their manager says that the business owner says, I want to implement Microsoft across my team. There's this great new tool that I studied about, and I would want my entire team to use it. And then they pay for it, they get the licenses, and a year later, it doesn't go anywhere. And I'm sure Microsoft has faced this problem across multiple companies. So they have a dedicated website. It's called adoption.microsoft.com, precisely for this. They have an entire game plan on how you're supposed to use Microsoft so that you can use their tools effectively. I just wanted to give one more example. So at StatCon Electronics, we had this case where this was a problem, not a sort of like a repetition problem, but also a security problem, where we wanted to make sure that the firmware that our company is building is not ever released into the wrong hands. So the person in the production team who has access to the firmware and is flashing that onto our microcontrollers is not able to leak that to anybody outside of the company. And what we were doing initially was we were handing them out the firmware, and they were directly flashing it onto the embedded systems. But then obviously, this is a security risk. So we designed a system where instead of doing that, you can basically upload all of the firmware in a secure fashion to some cloud where only the managers or the top management of the company has access to it. And the person in the production who has to flash it will be able to flash it without ever getting their hands onto it. This is actually a system that we started building for ourselves, but then it ended up being a commercial product which can now be sold elsewhere, and we're looking into selling that product to other companies as well. So I think another added advantage of trying to improve your processes is that you can often build them out in such a way that it can benefit other people as well. And that is where I believe every manager should focus on. If you identify a problem once a month, you sit down with your team and you look at all the places where your quality is low because there's repetitive effort or you're always erring in the same fashion, build a process, deploy it, and then make sure that they don't have any other option but to use those tools. You would very likely make significant changes in your team and end up getting a much more successful product. If your company has come up with some smart processes to improve the overall efficiency, I would love to hear about them in the comments. And as always, if you have any other solutions, suggestions, comments, let me know. Thank you.